Chris, let's start in Columbus. Ryan Day probably had the worst day of anybody in college football. I was talking to our colleague Sam Conn when we were driving last night. It's everything. You lose the game. That's the worst place to start. Okay, now you fall out of the Big Ten title race. You can't compete for that. You have the brawl on the field after, and you're sort of there's the viral clips of him kind of just standing there watching it as players are getting pepper sprayed and police are perhaps overreaching their authority there. A nightmare of a day for him. And you wake up here, and they're still in the playoff. I think there's a way to erase some of that, but the immediate aftermath, I can't believe this happened, Chris.
Yeah, so you and I watched this game at a walk-ons in College Station. And,
Yes.
you have multiple games on the TVs. And we were kind of paying attention to Tennessee Vanderbilt more, I think, early on. We were watching some of the other games that were going on. But we had Ohio State on the TV right next to us. And we kept being like, all right, like, when is Ohio State going to, turn it on here and pull away in a way we thought was coming in? They're a 21-point favorite coming into this game. And it's like, it's halftime, you're into the third quarter, and you're just like, I don't know if this is happening. Davis Warren throws a terrible interception in the end zone, and you're thinking, all right, Ohio State dodged the bullet. They're going to throw it deep to Jeremiah Smith. Here we go. And it just never happened. And I don't know how Ryan Day can be the head coach moving forward here. I know the buyout is crazy high. I don't know all the exact details. But, if you can't win this game, how can you win any Michigan game? Because you lose the last 3 games, top 5 matchups. It's understandable. Michigan won the national championship last year. But this was the game. Michigan is down. They're 6-5. They can't move the ball against anybody. And you're supposed to roll. This is an Ohio State team that everybody came back to beat Michigan to win the national championship. They can still win the national championship. But this Ohio State team moving forward next year is going to be much worse. You had everything here for this team. The defensive lineman, you brought in Chip Kelly, you got Will Howard out of the portal, and you ran Kyle McCord out of town. Everything was supposed to happen here, and it didn't. And this was one of the most shocking losses I think I can remember in college football in quite a while. Just the way...
That's the other piece of it, by the way, is Kyle McCord lighting the world on fire and beating Miami on the same day does not help your case.
No, and I think, like you said, that lasting image of Ryan Day just kind of standing there with his, slack-jawed as his fight's going on. He's asking somebody what's happening. He just has no control of the situation. And it just shows how, when it comes to Michigan, he doesn't know what to do. And he doesn't know how to handle himself. He clearly doesn't know how to motivate the team, how to get them ready, how to coach. There wasn't a bad decision or two in this game where it got to him. They just weren't ready to play this game the entire game. And I don't know, if Ohio State moving forward, how you can believe, Ryan Day's the guy who can get us to our goals at this point.
Well, it's just the whole game plan seems like it makes no sense. I know you want to stay committed to the running game. I know that's something that Chip Kelly and Ryan Day want to do. But here's the thing. Michigan, they don't have Will Johnson. The offense can't do anything. What is the strength of Michigan's team? The defensive front. So your game plan is to lean into the strength of what Michigan does best with, Kenneth Grant up front and Mason Graham and all these, where the actual NFL players are on Michigan's roster. That makes no sense. Meanwhile, you've got, like you said, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka outside. Will Howard might not be a world beater. Throw some 50-50 balls. Will Johnson's not playing. I don't understand that at all. The lack of aggressiveness. Make Michigan's defensive backs defend. You have the biggest advantage there. You've got 2 first-round receiver talents standing out there. And again, not only throughout the game, the last couple drives where the game was tied, where they needed to rally late, they couldn't even get a first down on that last drive. Those guys didn't even get a chance. Will Howard's not even throwing it in their zip code. It doesn't have to be a jump ball. Give those guys a chance to make the play. The entire game plan made no sense. I get, you want to be physical. You want to push them around. Well, guess what? After 3 quarters, you're not going to push them around. Why are you still trying? It's not working. Go win the football game.
It felt like they wanted to make a statement after getting out physical the last 3 years.
They
wanted
Chris.
to come in and show that we can. They made a statement, and it's a statement we knew for the last couple of weeks, which was this team can't run the ball in big situations. We already knew that. Everybody knew that except for essentially Ohio State. How many second and long runs did we see to pick up like 2 yards and put them in a third and long situation? I didn't understand the game plan at all. And, like, Michigan didn't even play that well in this game. They had like 5 first downs through 3 quarters. They barely moved the ball. Their first 2 scoring drives totaled 6 yards or 5 yards or something like that. Like, it wasn't like Michigan played out of their mind and upset Ohio State. Oh my God. No, Michigan didn't play well, and you still lost to them. Like, that's brutal. What do you think about Ryan Day? Like, I don't think he can be the coach moving forward. Obviously, if they go on and win the national championship, sure. But, like, what do you think about Ryan Day at this point?
Well, my main thing with Ohio State is, I remember, Chris, we were talking before the season. I was talking to Cam Teague, our Ohio State writer, and there was an idea that this Ohio State team might be one of the best teams in the last 5 or 10 years. You looked at their roster. They're so loaded on the defensive line. You add Caleb Downs. You know what they have at receiver. You're hearing this buzz about Jeremiah Smith. He might be a world beater. And we kind of knew the offensive line was, Will Howard was kind of a sort of a question mark. You knew like he had a pretty high floor, was a ceiling very high, but the potential was still there. But ultimately, you get to the end of the season, and you look at it and you say, okay, we get that quarterback and offensive line were a weakness, but this team did not play up to its potential. I mean, hardly at all this season. We didn't see them flex very often, and certainly not in big games. They beat Indiana. Okay, it's Indiana, but they didn't do that in a way that made you like, wow. The conversation after that game was not Ohio State, it was Indiana. And then obviously the Oregon game, you let that one get away. You lose that one sort of in spectacular fashion late. I just think you could say this about every team that Ryan Day has coached. Going to last year, the year before, they're not as good in the scoreboard as their talent and their roster suggests. And that, to me,
that's
I don't
coaching.
know where else you can point. Exactly. Where else do you point except this is a coaching issue? As for what you do, the buyout's pretty high. I think if I'm Ryan Day, I'm certainly having conversations about, like, well, what does North Carolina want to do? Keeping an eye on what else is out there just because you want to maybe have some control over what your future looks like. Because I think, again, forget the Michigan game. I don't say that as like a lax thing, but like you can erase some of this in the playoff. But next year you could beat Michigan, but if you're not competing for a national title, if you're not in the top 5 all season long, they're going to want to run you out of town. And you look at what Ohio State has coming back, they're going to have to do some work in the portal to have a team that looks like a national title contender. And that's the only thing that can make this go away. And Ohio State is not in a position to do that on autopilot. You're going to have to make some major, major changes and do some major, major work in the portal to have a team that looks like, because you're losing so much.
Yeah.
JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are going to be gone. You're not going to have Travion Henderson. You're not going to have Quinshon Judkins. You're not going to have Ibuka. You're going to have to rebuild that receiver room. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do at quarterback. Devin Brown's not the answer. We'll see what Julian saying is, and we'll see all these pieces. Ohio State's not built to be great again next year. This was the one that you had to win. If you win this game and you win a game or two in the playoff, that's kind of the floor for, like, people are kind of still a little bit angry about the Michigan stuff the last 3 years, but they're willing to put up with it. Now, you're looking like you might go on the road in round 1 in the playoff. You lose to Michigan in really embarrassing fashion. They're ready to run you out. They're not going to fire him before the playoff, but I think you could see a definite parting of ways because it makes a lot of sense for both sides to do that.
If they don't win the national championship, that next loss in the playoff is going to be another devastating loss where you're going to feel like Ryan Day can't win the big one for them. I don't know. Like, I don't think I feel like he wouldn't quit and want to leave. That's really kind of a weird look for a coach. And just pride-wise, you wouldn't expect a coach to do that. But, like, this is really hard on him, and I feel like he doesn't know how to handle this Michigan stuff, because he had that comment where he was like, the losses to Michigan are the worst thing in my life other than my dad dying. And I was like, it felt like he was like overcompensating to try to express to fans that it's a big deal to him.
I think that bleeds down to your team. Again, I think the best teams, and we saw this with Nick Saban a lot, the best teams play every week like it's just a game and that the results are secondary. People talk about the process. Well, what's the process? The process is doing the same thing every single week and getting the same results. And it feels like if you start getting tense or building things up, everybody knows the games are big and some games are bigger than others, but your preparation has to be the same. And if you can feel that attitude change and you can feel that pressure and feel that tighten, I don't know how when you have those comments, you just see how he's handled the last couple of years and how bad some of these losses have been for different kinds of reasons. Last year was probably the best loss that they've had, which is like, that's saying something. But ultimately, when you see that happen, how can you not watch this Ohio State team in the last few years and not say that some of those things that Ryan Day has done and what it's looked like has not bled over into his team? That's a team that looked tight. The game plan was bad. They didn't play very loose. They didn't seem to really have an edge to them in a game where they were talking a big game all week of like, hey, we want to take out some frustration of the last 3 years, and this means a lot to us, and you had every opportunity to do that. You should have won this game like 41-14. This Michigan team is not good. Ohio State has a much, much better roster, and they looked – I don't necessarily look equal. Ohio State didn't look like the better team in this game, which is insane because Michigan has looked so bad so often this year.